Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Decentraland Game Expo live panels. Today, we have an amazing panel for you. It is Leveraging True Ownership, the Reality of Gaming, NFTs, and Web3 Assets. I am Kim, Head of Partnerships and Marketing here at the Decentraland Foundation, and we have an amazing lineup of guests with us here today. So I will let you all do a quick introduction of yourself. We'll start with you, Nick.
Thanks for having us here. Glad to be back in World. My name is Nick Frontera. I am one of the founders and the CEO of Apollo Entertainment, the studio behind Satoshiverse and the Legion's 2029 game. I got my start in the metaverse and in NFTs in 2017. I was working as a lawyer in the entertainment industry at the time. And basically, I heard about Decentraland and it blew my mind and opened up my eyes to a whole world of possibilities that were there for gaming, for NFTs, for how Web3 can give people digital asset ownership. And that sent me down a very deep rabbit hole that led me to spending the last 8.5 years working in this space, building video games and infrastructure through the company. And now we have our game Legion's 2029, which you can learn all about at the booth here.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. Such an OG in our space here. Umberto from Pink Moon Studio. Would love to hear a little bit more about you.
Sure. First of all, again, thanks for hosting me and for this amazing event. Also, yesterday I was around. It was a very nice also listening to the panelists. So I hope that also today we're going to give another, good content for all the participants. Indeed, I'm Umberto. I'm the CEO and the founder of Pink Moon Studio. Started my journey in the Web3 crypto space in 2011, back in the days, when I bought my first Bitcoin like at $3.
Nice.
It was really
good decision.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on, back in the days, the people that bought Bitcoin, either they were using to buy pizza or to buy something else. And I was using to buy something else. So unfortunately, I didn't make a lot of money out of it. I actually spent all of the Bitcoin back then. But, by joining so early, I had the chance to see the entire space evolving from literally nothing, no exchanges. I was buying Bitcoin on Skype, sending money to some Russian dude here and there. But in 2017, met CryptoKitties for the first time, and this actually and the first concept of NFTs applied to gaming. I love the concept behind the CryptoKitties, and then in 2021, yes, everybody was talking about NFT again. I went back, looked CryptoKitties, they were still doing the same, and as a eager and very hardcore gamer, at a certain point, something clicked and connected dots, and I figured it out that Web3 technology applied to games, not all the games, just specific genre of games is actually make a lot of sense, so to say. And we started with KMON. I started with just a simple project, but nowadays Pink Moon Studio is a full-fledged gaming company, 35 employees, and about to launch our first game, KMON World of Kojia, which, as Nick also said, feel free to join our booth and to learn more about it.
Perfect. And Lenna, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. Decentraland has been a huge inspiration actually since I launched KNation in 2021, but you guys sound like real OGs. In terms of like when I got started in the space, where I used to live in Brighton had one of the first Bitcoin ATMs. And I saw it every day when I bought coffee, but didn't get any Bitcoin. So, hey, that's me. But, it was always in the back of my mind as something I was interested in. And I actually started this through the fact I was doing marketing for somebody who was running a stake pool. And when I started doing that, I obviously started learning a bit about what was going on and the awesome things that were happening in the space. And I saw that there was a bit of a gap for something a bit niche, which is where KNation was born. So KNation actually started as an animation project, but we saw people fall in love with their characters so much so that we decided these are also something we can expand on with the IP, and we started creating digital avatars. So every KNation NFT comes with a 3D digital avatar, which is rigged, and you can use it in many games, including our own, which we're also building out at the moment. Brief intro, but yeah, we'll touch on that more a little bit later.
Perfect. Well, we're so honored to have you all join us. So for everyone listening in, I know we have 245 people already. So This is for the Decentraland Game Expo. This is our first time doing this event, and the idea is really to show off what's happening in Web3 gaming in one place, kind of like you would at a big conference and there's an expo floor. We're taking that to the virtual world. So no matter where in the world you are, you can come in and learn about these amazing Web3 games. We're really excited to have a variety of gameplay here with us. We have some strategy games, some RPGs, some, first player fighter, like a lot of different puzzle games. So a variety here, no matter what your game style is, something for you to find. And of course, it wouldn't be a Decentraland event without free wearables, free emotes, and a few parties along the way. So we are honored. This is day 2 of a 4-day event. We are in world at 081. So we'd love to have you jump in world and follow us around. But I know some people are also listening maybe at work or on the way home. And so you can follow us on X, YouTube, and LinkedIn. We are streaming live kind of everywhere today to just make sure people can see what is possible. So we are going to move around as we go. We are right now, the screen is showing you the Game Expo Plaza. So here you will see community members hanging. We have a ticketing system for these booths. So every day we're doing a daily quest where if you visit the designated booths of the day, you can then win different emotes or wearables that are designated to that day. We also have featured games from our game jam. These are brand new games in Decentraland. If you play the games, get past level 1, you can then redeem your ticket for a traditional fair claw. So the claw machine comes down, you win a prize. These are a big mix of prizes from the foundation and the community. So we're excited to see what everyone wins this week. But let's start our tour and our conversation. So let's head over to the booth for Satoshiverse. So we're going to Legion's 2029 booth, which is at -479. If you are in the chat, you will see Dana, who is doing the stream for us, is typing it in -479, and you can hit go to and head on over. We will meet you in this booth. So while we're doing that, Nick, I would love you to talk more about Satoshiverse, one of our, OG communities here in Decentraland.
Yeah, absolutely. So, wow, I guess going all the way back, 2020, I was lucky enough to get to work with my grandfather, who was a 87-year-old comic artist who spent his life working for DC and Marvel Comics, working on basically every major superhero IP you could imagine. He was most famous for Wonder Woman and Transformers and the Beetle Yellow Submarine comic, but he worked on everything. I helped him, when I got involved in the space, I helped him kind of launch himself as an NFT artist. He brought his comic style to the space, quickly became one of the top NFT artists in the space, and we decided we wanted to create a superhero for the blockchain world. And so that led to us thinking, well, who better than the creator of Bitcoin, Satoshi, as this, backstory for this superhero. And in 2020, we created Satoshi the Creator as kind of the overall superhero for our story. We built a lore around him. Jose released a ton of comic art around him, and then we launched Satoshiverse. Satoshiverse was the extension of that lore and took us from a comic IP into this gaming universe. We released in 2021 one of the first 3D collections built in Unreal Engine called the Legionnaires. Those were cool because we built them in a way that they were fully 3D and ready for implementation. Took a little bit longer to build the game, so it was probably 2 years later that you could actually use them in anything. But that was our first collection. That kind of gave us the funding we needed to build the game for 2 years. And then we released another collection called the 8-Mo Army, which was a derivative project of our Bored Ape Yacht Club ape. Again, that was like high fidelity. They have fur and expressions and all this stuff. And that kind of led for the last 2.5 years, we've been developing our game, Legion 2029, which high level, I guess the important things, it's free to play. It's a PC game. It's a high fidelity, very fast paced experience. We essentially took inspiration from 3 different genres, predominantly third person hack and slash games like God of War. RPGs like Diablo and RuneScape, which were my favorite game genre growing up. And then the game loop is inspired by roguelikes, which are games like Hades, which was a very popular game. We kind of moshed that all together with a fully blockchain-enabled experience where everything's being tracked in the NFT metadata, and you can pretty much, all the items you get can be minted as NFTs. And we did, a lot there. One of the cool things that you might see, actually, I see one of our community members and team members, Danny Resoro here, is wearing one of our linked wearables. So that was pretty cool. That was something that we did with Decentraland. Actually, it was the first linked wearables collection. So we worked closely with the team to launch those. Basically, if you have a Legionnaire, which is our original collection.
Nick, I was gonna say, Dana, can you click on Danny and show her profile really quick? I think you just walked by her right there, Danny Rosero, and we can open it up and show that avatar
sweet, yeah.
anytime. But go ahead, sorry.
There it is. So basically, essentially, there were 71 different variations of this armor where the pattern that was on it mirrored the pattern for the Legionnaire that it was connected to. So there was this kind of tie between the avatars you had and the armor types that they had in our game, which are obviously very different, like stylistically, graphically, but we were able to do a really cool representation of that thanks to the linked wearables, and give our community something really cool that they could use in game, and in world here, which was fun. So yeah, I mean, I guess on the game, it's free to play. You can download it from our website or from Hyperplay. It would be awesome to check it out. Right now, we're developing with the community. It's open to play. You don't need an NFT, but we're very much in the testing and development phase. So just having fun working with the community and improving things every day.
Awesome. Love that. And I know with Satoshiverse, some of these NFTs are linked wearables. So just wanted to talk a little bit about that technology behind NFTs and gaming and what's possible here as people are continuing to build. Because I know if anyone is joining that may not be as familiar with NFTs, wanted to take a quick step back and just say that the NFTs that we're talking about here, for the most part, are gaming related. So they could be in Decentraland, that would be your clothes or your assets. So it could be your hair, your jewelry, your shoes, all known as wearables, or it could be emotes, your movements. So as you can see, our character here, Dana, she is doing the piao piao emote, or we have a little firework going off. So these are all actions, but each one is an individual NFT. So they can be bought and sold on the marketplace, given to people. And I know in gaming, traditionally, you're buying skins, you're upgrading, you're doing all of this stuff, and you don't really own those assets. What is, as you're thinking about gameplay, why was it so important for you to build something on the blockchain with NFTs integrated?
Yeah, so, I kind of came from the traditional IP world, right? And was a gamer myself who loved collecting collecting items and developing my character. And so I played games probably for 4 or 5 years where I amassed this huge account, but then couldn't really do anything with it, right? I couldn't sell it. I couldn't really trade a lot of the items. If something happened, I had one instance where a botter actually got into my account and the account got banned and all my items got lost after 4 years of progress. And, even, you look at Vitalik, apparently the story for why he got involved in creating Ethereum was because of issues with his World of Warcraft account and, some of the item stuff there. So I would say that, in terms of where I always say that NFTs are useful wherever you would want to own a digital asset. And really that's the predominant use case of an NFT is it creates this infrastructure for digital asset ownership. And I think the most intuitive place where we already think we own digital assets is gaming. And I think that, from my perspective, and I think why I really got interested early on and made it kind of core to what we're building, not just on the content side, but on the infrastructure side, is that you don't own anything in traditional gaming. You have a limited license to use stuff. And that we still have a ways to go before, we really define what ownership means in this NFT space. But it's the first time, I think, in the last, history of digital assets that we really have the opportunity to create an infrastructure for true digital asset ownership. And I think if we don't embrace that, we're just going to be behind the curve. There's too many reasons to do it on a macro level. It's just a matter of how fast everybody else gets there, right? And so you don't want to be too early, but you don't want to be too late. And so we're trying to be, just right and kind of do things in a way that makes sense, but huge proponents of true ownership.
Mm-hmm. And I want to open it up to Umberto and Lenna too. Like, as you all are developing different parts of your Web3 ecosystem behind the scenes here, how are you deciding how much goes on the blockchain? How much is built as an NFT versus gameplay action? Like, what are those conversations like on the back end for all of you? I'll kick that to Umberto.
Well, first of all, I can tell that I totally agree with what Nick just said. For example, my experience was exactly the same, as a player, when you, as a gamer, either you have time or you have money. So when you're a teenager, you have a lot of time, you don't do homeworks, you only play video games. And then the problem is that, your time to play start to get lower and lower and lower. And then you figure it out that, 4 or 5 years of your life are like just stuck there. And, all the time and the money you have invested are completely worthless. You don't really consolidate those. And this is exactly, I would say, the flow of thoughts that, for example, us in Pink Moon Studio, we use to decide either a thing should be an NFT or not. Because at the end of the day, in our perspective, not everything in game should be an NFT. There are items that there's no problem for those items to not being an NFT, while other items should be NFTs. Or, of course, it's up to the player to decide if they want to mint them as an NFT. And it all goes to the fact that how difficult it was to collect that item, in my perspective. So, if that is a specific item within a game, whatever, that it took me a lot of times to, grind it or to craft it or to obtain it or whatever. So meaning that I'm, putting value, because at the end of the day, time is value. In that case, minting it as an NFT is a great way for consolidate that item, that value into something, really consolidate the value. So that's what we're most of the time when we're looking at, should this be an NFT or not? We're trying to figure it out. Okay, is this something that is going to be, an item that turns out to have a value where the players are going to spend a lot of time in order to obtain it? If so, then we should enable the players, of course, to mint it as an NFT because it has a value. And so meaning if it's at a value, it's a part of the economy within the game itself. If it's just, a random item that you found around the map randomly because it's a crafting item, whatever, that shouldn't be an NFT. There's no need for it to be an NFT. That's kind of the flow of thought that, basic line flow of thought that we use.
Totally get that. Lenna, go ahead and pass it to you. Also, I just want to say your look here is totally vibing with our neon purple theme. So love to see it.
Now when we came in, I've got a couple of colors. Remote hair came in handy. Didn't have to buy those colors as NFTs, luckily. But yeah, so, just to kind of add on to what these guys were saying, and I will actually mention another project on Cardano. So there's a project called Stuff and Book.io that are building on Cardano and also on Base. And their founder takes around a watch of $10,000 and says to the audience, who's got a Kindle here? And the people that put their hands up, he then says, okay, I'll give you this $10,000 if you can send me one of the books. And no one is able to do that, obviously. So I think he kind of hit the nail on the head really well. I've been keep using this analogy, but I think some people don't care about that and don't want to own it, or they don't necessarily need to. And I agree with those points that Umberto and Nick just made. But for accessibility, it's great if people can get onboarded and play these games without having to have that initial block point, block to entry. But as long as there's an option for people to then be able to opt in, and you can do that in a way that does educate prior, then there's no reason why most of our digital assets can't be NFTs. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so much that can be done in the space. And then the question is, what should be done? I know in many of the panels we've been saying, how do we get people to adopt into Web3 gaming, and the parts of everything could be on the blockchain, but what should, and where do we focus here? And I think the number one thing has been is the game fun? And then what does blockchain enable that makes it better? than what it could be as a Web2 game. And I think that has been a really interesting conversation and a theme we've seen kind of throughout this whole week as we're going into here. So I would love to hear from all of you. And then while you guys are answering, we will move over to the next booth. But just how it kind of impacts that in-game economy and that player engagement, knowing people can do the buying, selling, trading. It adds a totally different element of the community and how they get involved. So I'd love to hear from all of you how you get your community involved, how you can work through that like secondary sales of stuff and making sure people are aware of what's possible on the marketplaces related to the games you're talking about. I will pass it to Lenna to start, and we will head over to the next booth while you're doing that. So I will type the coordinates in.
Yeah, for sure. So I think we're just heading over to the beta. So for our community, I mean, we have some games which are accessible only via certain NFTs. And actually a good example of that is recently we launched an alpha level and demo of one of our games. And you could only access it if not only did you have our NFT, but you also owned a pair of our digital wearables. So you had to have a specific type of trousers to play this game and give us feedback and provide it. And I think, partially wearables can be something that is like a flex in the same way that skins are, but also they can have these additional accessibility functions. And in another collaboration we did with the Sandbox, we had a portal which was only accessible if you had a certain wearable or held one of our NFTs. And I think for us, with our community, how we're using that ownership and like what makes it exciting and what makes it another way to engage is, okay, if you have these certain aspects, these certain attributes, then you can access certain things. And those have included, meeting with the team, holders lunches, holders dinners, stuff like that in real life as well. So there can be this crossover from digital and physical. But yeah, for us, that's something that we've really used to connect with the community and make it quite exciting to have particular traits, airdrops as well, if people have certain assets. And yeah, early access to certain things has been a huge part. But we're still in builder phases as well. So at the moment, we have a couple of demos out. We have, even in Discord, you can verify your NFTs and then become a holder, and then you can have access to our alpha channels. So, and then you can have access to actually give us feedback and help us to shape the next steps. And for us, that's been like a major part of the community involvement.
Absolutely. And I know we're in your booth, so I just want to give it a shout out. This is -486 for those of you that are listening and need the coordinates. We are in the Clay Nation booth. This is such a fun space. So I would love, for those that aren't familiar, just kind of talk through it a little bit. Dana, can you also walk over so they can watch that trailer? Yeah, it's just a lot of fun here. So what, if someone's not familiar with Clay Nation at this point, kind of what should they know about the inspiration here?
Yeah, so a huge inspiration to us is like Aardman, so Chicken Run, things like that. When like most of our team are from the UK, not all of them, but we're huge fans of clay stop motion animation. And that was actually the biggest inspiration when we decided to launch this project. All of our original NFT collection are made handmade. So every single attribute is actually handmade in clay, and you can see our animators' fingerprints pressed into the clay.
That's amazing. Hold on. That is so cool.
I think if you turn around in the booth, you can see some of them on the cubes. Those are some of the original collection. And then, oh, sorry, what were you going to say then?
I was going to say, Dana, let's turn and go up to those cubes just so people can really get that visual of the clay. So
yeah,
cool.
So those are completely handmade. And every single one in our collection is. And then we released 3D versions of those as a additional functionality utility, so to speak. And those 3D models are what you can see in the game and demo that's right in front of us there. And those 3D models are what are being used in our games and experiences. So yeah, it started with clay animation, and then we had this clay collection, and then we thought, how do we make this even more immersive? How do we grow this community and have this place where people can really like express themselves, have fun? And as an adult, having that nostalgia that something like claymation was so important to us when we actually shaped our virtual environments as well. So it's all completely handcrafted. Everything's made in-house, and it's just been really fun.
That's awesome.
What we want to do, is have fun basically, and have other people having fun as well.
Yeah, and you have a giveaway for the community, Dana. If we could walk over to show people how they can go to the wearables that are in the back corner of the booth. I see people hanging out in front of them. So they are definitely working on the claims. Some really cool shoes, and I love the hat.
Thank you. Yeah, we got a couple of compliments on the hat. I saw one of our community managers, Loza, running around just now. She's been repping the hat the whole time.
I've seen a lot of the hat. I know people are out there grabbing them for sure. So it's just really fun being able to see that. And that clay vibe kind of comes through on these. So just a really cool way.
Thank you.
Yeah, there we go. We're seeing the hat getting equipped here right now. So if anyone is in World, Claynation booth has their claims right in the back left corner of 04. Yeah, -4 is 86.
Oh, good. So on that screen to start, it's a demo we recently released an environment. It's basically a simple shooter game. The main reason we released it was to get feedback, but also to actually show off a part of the built world that we are working on. So this is one of our hubs. A number of these are equipped for iCommerce and e-commerce as well. And we're planning on rolling that out to our community so they can actually offer the same, like similar to how you've got these booths, you know, we want to be able to say to our community, you can create these as well. And all in this clay aesthetic, which, you know, we think we've hit the tone right, but
yeah, very fun and such a cool way to bring that aesthetic in World. Like we say all the time, there's so many different aesthetics you can choose in gaming. There's like, you know, high-end, hyper-realistic AAA style, and then obviously Decentraland's that lo-fi nostalgia vibe, and then there's everything in between. And that's what I think is so cool about Web3 gaming is people are really going to the extremes. They're trying everything that's different, bringing in what's possible, and showing off these very different vibes with their communities. So love to see that here. And I know you mentioned kind of this NFT token gating. For anyone that isn't aware, that is something we do in Decentraland as well. So if, for example, there is a concert in Decentraland and you've been to one of the concerts before and the artist decided to drop an NFT to all of those that have come to the concert, they can also do like a token gated backstage where you can have a different experience that is token gated for different members of the community. And I think that's such an amazing use case of NFTs that we don't talk about enough as like NFTs as the ticket, which you were talking about, Lenna, is like a way to get early access, alpha, different channels. And so I don't think people think of it as the asset, but I think of it also as access, just being able to allow for more visibility or access to the team and have, maybe it's your own Slack channels, Discord channels, whatever it may be. It's just a huge benefit of how you can do that in like a one-click way with integrations.
Yeah, I think our best, well, maybe not the best, but in my opinion, it was my favorite. We had a collaboration with Snoop Dogg and his son Cordell, and we had a party in Paris where Snoop DJ'd, and we were able to invite like 20 or 30 of our Clay Nation holders to that party, and they came and got to see that. And I think like it's quite unrivaled in that sense of that kind of ownership. Like when you buy something at the store, when you buy something online, you know, you don't really, there's not really much of a follow through. You get the item, which is great, but there's no continued community involvement, you know, other than through the, unless you're putting yourself out there, you know, which is super important. So
absolutely. All right, this booth has been so fun. We are going to make our move over to KMON. Where are we heading next? I'm trying to think where we're going. Let is go to, sorry, Umberto, if you want to talk a little bit more about your experience and what you're building while we make moves around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, talking about the economy question that you brought up, it's something that, you know, usually during, I don't know why, but during the last couple of weeks, I've been talking about this pretty much, especially in game, especially in online games. There's economy already. I mean, that's something that I also I try to tell to people that, you know, we are not trying to reinvent any sort of wheel. Because if you play, you know, any MMO games from WoW, even Minecraft Online or EVE Online, whatever, all of those games, Web2 games, they have an economy. So you do stuff, you get coins, you sell it, you buy stuff from other players. So there's always been an economy. Games are built on economies. The only difference by actually changing the fact that instead of playing with, you know, a fake currency within a game. You actually play with a token, which is actually has a value outside of the game itself. And even the assets, you're not talking just by digital items, but you have NFTs and everything. It just changed the paradigm for the players themselves. And I always trying to make the example, especially to my mom, when I was explaining, you know, the difference between an NFT and not. I was always taking and sharing that by owning their own assets, by being part of a real economy with a real value that is actually can be extrapolated even outside the game itself, the players, they do tend to feel they spend more time taking care of their own assets. And in this is something that also we saw in our, you know, retention metrics and everything. All of our game are, you know, free to play. You can play it without any NFT. But we do see a huge difference in retention rate, engagement within the game from the NFT players and the non-NFT players. And the reason why, it's extremely simple. And this is the example I make to my mom. When you buy a car and you own your own car, you take care of the car. You don't let your car get ruined, get crashes, and everything, because it has an intrinsic value. You know that it has a value, and you always know that even if you don't want to sell it, you know, if you take care of your car will keep its value. And this is exactly what's happened also within games, especially when you do, you know, connect NFTs to characters, to something that has a progress that can goes up and it can goes down. In that case, you will see players really spending way more time making sure their character, their players, that whatever they have, their assets within the game, do not lose value, you know, by not spending time on it. So this is the first thing, which is, again, it's not reinventing the wheel. It's just changing a bit the point of view and giving actually more power to the user themselves, because then they are free to decide whatever they want to do with their own assets. And this is exactly, you know, what's going back even before by talking what is an NFT and what's not an NFT. Another cool point is indeed about the token gate experiences. You know, the point of view that I have and we have in Pingmo Studio, there is another very good example of where NFT can be applied to games, especially for token gating activities, which are DLC. Very practice common in the web too. You know, you buy a game, you finish the game, and then, you know, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years after, the studio issue a DLC. So you buy $40 of a DLC, which is, you know, unlock extra content within the game. Extremely common things. This is something that you can even do token gated. This is actually the vision that we have for our games. And a certain point is, if you're going to drop a DLC, we will drop them as NFT. So what does it mean? That as a player, I do buy it, I do play my part of the game, the extra content that I got from the DLC, and then there's the catch. I can finally resell it, which is another important thing, which is have been completely removed from the gaming industry, which is the secondary market.
Totally.
You know, before Steam, nowadays all the games distribution is probably mostly digital. You know, they're getting rid of the physical copy, and one of the most reason, not only for cost, it also because physical copies has a huge secondary market. You know, or I remember back in the days playing PlayStation 2 before, you know, internet took over. When I finished the game, I was giving to a friend of mine, you know, hey, play it and give me $10, whatever, give me some bucks just for it. But, you know, and this is something that can be done again. This is something, you know, imagine you drop a new part of your game, whatever, you drop a new DLC, you drop it as an NFT, such as that the player can play it, and when it's over, boom, they can resell it to someone else. And the final thing is, it actually is a good for the players to judge the work of the developer, because if it is good, then there's going to be a demand for that DLC. If the DLC is actually a shitty DLC, nobody will going to buy it, you know, in a secondary market perspective. So this is another way that gives even more power to the community, to the player themselves. Again, one more time. So this is something really important. And again, it's not reinventing the wheel. It's just, you know, taking what is happening already in Web 2 and by the use of technology, enable new experiences, enable new user experience. Actually, not even that new, but bringing back experiences that have been, you know, lost by the moving from physical to digital. So yeah, that's the sort of the vision that we have at Pingmo Studio and what we're trying to build and bring it over our game, especially KMON World of Kujia.
Yeah, and I love that asset, Dana. If you can look a little bit up to the running asset you guys have on the top here, I know when you sent the team the GLB files, I believe it was for this one, they were so excited. They were like, this looks awesome. Because if you go far away, it just looks like it's running in the sky. And it's just a ton of fun to be able to see, you know, what's possible when you take some of these like in-game assets for you and your marketing assets and bring them into a different world, what that looks like from a brand integration perspective. And so I would love to talk to you all a little bit more about that interoperability. Obviously, all of our games are not interoperable in the way people talk about it, but there are baby steps on how we can get there. And I think one of the goals of the event like this is, even if the assets aren't necessarily all interoperable, like what could we do together to show what's possible, jump from one experience to another. So everyone right now, if you're in Decentraland, in each booth, there is a way for you to jump to all of these games, their home pages. If it's in Decentraland, you can literally teleport to the game itself and start playing and give that feeling of interoperability. Even if, you know, you can't physically bring your asset from one game to the next yet. But so would love to hear all of you as we're talking about interoperability being that major benefit of Web3 assets. How realistic is it for games and platforms to kind of have a shared ecosystem, and how far away are we from something like that? I'll start with Nick, because I don't know if we've started with you on a question yet.
Sure. Yeah. No, interoperability is something I think we think about all the time. And, you know, I think there's definitely a kind of a range of possibilities that we could talk about within what it means to be interoperable. I think as kind of a foundational point, Web3 allows us to do certain things with, you know, data management and authentication and ownership that will kind of create the base layer for interoperability, in the sense that I can look at the blockchain, I can verify that you own a certain NFT, and I can do that without referencing, you know, a centralized database. I think that's super important. I think then, you know, we start to talk about what could interoperability, you know, mean and look like in the future. And I think that there's certain things that are a little bit further off and may never happen, or may happen in a different way than we're hoping they will. Things like, you know, weapons being transferable in different games, things with stats, you know. I think what you're going to start to see is a lot of ecosystem type projects having interoperability within the games in their ecosystem. So having multiple games within an ecosystem where the resources or the items or the characters can be used in multiple games. I think that's going to be the lower hanging fruit. Then you have stuff, you know, like the linked wearables, which I think is a great example of how you can represent with the same NFT one object in one world and another object in the other. You're still kind of using an API on the back end, and there's still kind of some pieces that you have to weave together to make it happen. So I think there's infrastructure that still needs to be built there. But I think another good example, you know, it doesn't have to be that complicated. For example, when we launched our alpha for the community, we had something like 30 partners, including Decentraland, come in, and essentially members from their community can still come into the game, create a custom avatar, and they're going to customize the whole avatar, except on the chest, there's going to be a hero emblem that is the logo or the thing from the project they're coming from. And I think that was a really simple way that we could say, hey, I want to rep my community. I'm going to create my cool avatar and do this stuff. And then, you know, they can play the game and mint that as an NFT for free. And now they've got an NFT that represents the community they came from. And so I think for us, the reality, and you know, I didn't answer the last question, but one of the things I was going to say a little bit on the contrarian side is that in order to have great engaged player economies, you do need a player base that's fluid and playing and large, right? It's hard to establish a true player economy without a larger player base. And I think right now in the Web3 space, it's such a small part of the overall gaming community right now that collaborating and finding ways to offer gamers that are interested in Web3 the chance to go to different, you know, encouraging them to try other games, because you can certainly be part of multiple player economies, right?
100%, yeah.
So I think that's, you know, where we start to see, you know, the rubber meet the road on, look, we want people just playing Web3 games, trying different things out, different genres, participating in these player economies, we've seen some games take some pretty unique approaches on interoperability. I think that honestly, one of the most important ones that I'm really looking forward to seeing grow, and I've seen some cool companies like Ready Player Me, for example, and some of these other avatar-based interoperability, is this idea of identity. I think that at some point, we have so many PFP projects and so many people with avatars. It's going to be very important for us to be able to use those avatars in different places. And I think at a very basic level, that will probably be the thing that gets prioritized first in terms of, cross-platform interoperability. And we're already seeing tooling to make that happen. So even the VRM exports from Decentraland is a really cool step in that direction. And we're probably, the rate things are going, 6 months to a year, we'll see some really good infrastructure come out, and all the games, the Web3 games, will start incorporating it. I feel like that's the trend. Every time something comes out, it takes about 6 months, and then everybody's got it in, like social wallets and account abstraction and all this stuff. So yeah, I'm excited. I think that's going to be a really cool connecting, thing that brings all the games in this space together.
Yeah, absolutely. VRM imports and exports was something we were talking about on a space earlier today. And I think that ability, for anyone that isn't aware, within Decentraland, all of the wearables, unless a creator opts out, is part of the VRM export program, where you can go into your backpack. So Dana, if you're able to go into your backpack and just show the outfit, we can show how the VRM export kind of works. So on the left side, Dana, you can click that VRM. Yep. And you could see that it would then open up a file where you can download and bring it somewhere else. So you could bring it to OnCyber or wherever you want to do. We even download them and use them, in Zoom meetings with a little bit of tweaking here and there. So that ability to say, this is my digital identity, this is how I identify, and I want to bring it to other virtual worlds or games, is just like really fun and a step in the right direction. For how we can allow people to really use those NFTs and own them and move them around as they wish. So that's been really fun to see. I'm going to pass it to Lenna to keep, and Umberto, feel free to jump in as you'd like here on this conversation.
No, for sure. I mean, I think Nick did a great job of summarizing, to be honest. I agree with what Nick said about avatars probably being something that is prioritized in terms of that identity, and it being something that's super important. And we've certainly experienced that when we've wanted to integrate our collection with other projects and other games. We have encountered that issue a few times. Okay, yeah, we have different standards, and so something I think I had a conversation with someone at the Blockchain Game Alliance was about producing these standards for certain aspects and certain game assets and much more than that. And I think that over time we'll see more and more projects, especially new projects, adhering to certain standards, so that it is easier and it is smoother to do that. Because, for example, when we bridged our Play Nation collection over to the Sandbox, we recreated, the Sandbox team nicely recreated every single attribute in Voxel. But really, that's not sustainable for the majority of projects to do that for every single platform. So I think, it's great if it's two larger projects and you're able to really get the community traction there. But if you just want to be able to offer it to your community to use the avatars in lots of different places, and recreating whole collections isn't going to ride very well. So I think having these standards introduced will be super important, and that's what's going to unlock a lot of opportunities there, I think.
If I may also just to add something about the interoperability thing, I think sometimes also we tend, especially when you think about interoperability, the first things that people tend to think about it is okay, I have this, asset, and I will just put it with on the other things, and it will be just the same assets on another style or whatever, which I think is actually a limiting factor just looking in that way. Because as Nick said at the beginning, at the end of the day, what's the blockchain is an open database. At the end of the day, is that any NFT is actually connected to a pair of data. Any NFT bring it over a pair of data stored on chain. So the interoperability is also the moment where we, for example, as a studio, we are capable to connect to Satoshiverse NFTs and allow people from Satoshiverse bring it over their NFT. They are not going to look they might also even going to be different. Maybe in Satoshiverse, they are on a specific items, and in our game, it's going to be a completely different items. So that is something else that it's still about interoperability, but it's not just interoperability from the fact that I have a sword and I get a sword. It's more like I have a sword in one game, and that sword, when I connect it to another game, it renders and it gives me something different, which is coherent with the other game. For example, we always make this example that we as a ping pong studio, we have indeed this vision of creating this set of universe of MMORPG interconnected between each other. And when we're talking about interconnected between each other, this is what we mean, that right now, if you have a Cryptomon NFT in the KMON game, it does render as the little dragon that you saw, in the sky running. But imagine that we always said that we would like to create a sort of a cowboy Red Dead Redemption sort of MMORPG game. The same NFT, which is in KMON, renders as, the Cryptomon. In the Far West game, it renders and it becomes the horse. So that is also part of interoperability. You have one single asset that you can be used in different ecosystem and in different ways, which is something it's way bigger just by the simple, carry over the style or something else. It's actually open up to an endless opportunity between project and studios to actually collaborate to each other, technically speaking, even without the permission of the other person. Because if it's on the blockchain, it's open and I can connect it, and the actual player is the owner. So he's giving me the access to that data. He's giving me the access to the data and to tell me, hey, take the data from that NFT and render it as you wish. And so this is, I think, is something way bigger that can open up even more opportunities for interoperability. And it's actually another very good things for Web3, because even, for example, if we do fail or we stop our game, our NFTs can be picked up by someone else and build on top of those.
Yeah, that longevity piece, I think as we think about Web3 and what's possible, the ability for someone to drop something and someone else to pick it up and keep building and move on and evolve it over time is really, really cool, especially with a lot of the open source code happening in this space. I know we have about 12 minutes left. We've talked a lot about the positives and some of those challenges, but I would love to hear some advice. You guys are game builders working on the future of this space. So what advice would you give to developers or companies that are looking to explore adding NFTs or Web3 assets to their games? And really, what should they prioritize to succeed here? Lenna, I will start with you this time.
I didn't think it would be me. In terms of advice, and it does link, I mean, I think to prioritize, for success, you should focus on creating meaningful and probably, some utility-driven NFTs are really, really beneficial. I think it can help with scaling, it can help with community engagement, and it can also help you to actually build relationships with your community as well. And I think trust is such an important part of any game that is relating so much to their community. So if you can use NFTs in that way, I really, really recommend it. And my only advice would just be to embrace the collaboration. It used to be about survival of the fittest, and I think more recently it is about collaboration. So that'd be another bit of advice, would be talk to other projects they're building, what's worked for them, what hasn't, and see where you can work together to do something meaningful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the idea that we're all fighting for the same audience is silly and minimalistic in the sense that we expect people are going to hang out in Decentraland and in Sandbox and in Nifty Island. The audience shouldn't be competitive. It should be that idea of this audience should be nurtured as a whole. And someday they may feel like playing, a Tetris style game. And someday they may feel like having a social moment. And someday they want to get into a fighter mode. And you just want to have options available to people for whatever that vibe is they're feeling that day. So totally hear that. And I love this idea. We talk about it a lot too, of just that collaboration over competition in this space. The Web3 space is still too early and too small to be fighting over one another. Absolutely. Passing it off to you guys.
You guys have done a great job of that, just to kind of highlight, especially with this event. I think it's so nice that you've pulled us all into this, and I think that speaks volumes in terms of how you see that. And I think it's super impactful. And I know for a fact that dozens of our community members over the last few days have jumped in here, maybe for the first time, and you know that it says everything I'm trying to say, really. Just like collaboration is so important, and I think I can see a couple of them now. So thanks those guys for joining too.
Yeah. Hi everyone from Clay Nation joining. Thanks for being here. Go ahead, Umberto.
No, actually, I mean, I think, Kim, what you just said is exactly actually the beauty, especially of the gaming industry, first of all, because it's not only just about Web3, but the gaming industry is exactly like this. I mean, if you look at the gaming industry, even in the Web2 space, is not an industry of a winner gets all.
Right.
You know, at gamers, I do play FIFA, I do play Fortnite, I do play Call of Duty, and I do play sometimes Call of Duty and sometimes Battlefield, which are competitor games. But there is not a winner take all industry. It's an industry where gamers just jump between one and each other, and they keep picking up games they've passed on and everything. So indeed, the collaboration between all of us, it should be even more incentivized and everything. In order to give, and a piece of advice that I could give to developers and company, especially looking on NFT Web3 assets, first of all, I would say, figure it out if it really makes sense to do that. Because I also saw, and especially, due to the craze right now, not that much, but, in the previous year, even more, that everybody was doing NFTs, everybody were tokenizing literally everything, which didn't make any sense. So do it if it really makes sense, because otherwise you're just gonna, trying to, riding a trend without actually providing real value. And technically speaking, in the current moment, you're actually putting barriers to a possible user base that otherwise wouldn't have those barriers. Second one, in prioritization, especially for game developers, is of course really design your game without taking in consideration Web3, NFTs, and tokens. So meaning that the moment that you design the game, you do the game design and you think how the game should work and everything, design it without taking in consideration those factors. Because this is, in my opinion, this is the actually only way to build a proper game. Because if the moment that if you start building already with in mind, all the monetization, the NFTs, and the value of the NFTs going up and the token going up, and you start giving priority, thought priority to something which is wrong within games, which is not fun. So this is also what we try to do. And when we're starting also building World of Kojia is let's build a game considering that there's no NFT, no token involved. Then once we have designed the game, let's start picking up and figure it out where it does make sense. Start adding tokenized assets, such as even a token or an NFT. Because in this way, you really give, even when you do a brainstorm session, you do prioritize the game first and not the monetization point of view, which I still believe right now, the industry across the board is better. We were there already also during like 3 years ago, during the first play to earn, craze and everything. But I still believe right now, I see it less, but there is still too much of, focus into this value kind of monetization kind of things when designing a game. It's okay, it's there, it must be there because it's actually the cherry on the top of the cake, but it shouldn't be the cake. And I still see a bit of still in the industry right now that it's most of the project or new developers jumping on the trends on that perspective. And if I can give a piece of advice, because I can tell we did it, also we were trying and we explored everything. It doesn't just work. The best things that works is build a game without NFTs, and only after that, figure it out where NFT and Web3 technology makes sense to exist. Otherwise, if it doesn't, and if you don't find anything where it makes sense, just go without it. Just don't do it for the sake of doing it, so to say.
Yeah, I think priority is it fun? Do you think your community wants it? And then does blockchain make sense? Like, it's not, oh, I can use blockchain. How do I make something blockchain? I think adding it on as a because we can versus it makes sense. I totally agree with that. Nick, I know you were doing a lot of nodding over there, so wanted to let you weigh in as well.
Yeah, I'd say I agree with 95% of what was said. I think that most everything, we do some consulting with traditional game studios that want to build, have built traditional games and want to, port those to Web3 or add Web3. And typically, depending on the genre, the advice I'll give them is, sure, if you have a good game, you can add NFTs on as a layer in certain places, kind of exactly what Umberto said. I think the one exception is RPGs. I think that if you're building an RPG, you do need to be thinking about NFTs during the design phase. The reason is not, and I agree with Umberto on the point that you shouldn't be thinking about the financialization of the game and how players are going to be making money, but you do have to take into consideration that you're going to be in a real money player economy, which completely changes, the dynamics of looting items, item value, right? Like we saw a really good example. It was the Diablo 3 real money auction house, which most people hated. I actually liked it, but the general, feedback was, get this out of the game ASAP. And I think there are games where if you open up the gates to players coming in and getting farming items and the value of items coming down because they're being over, the supply is just going up way too much, you lose the essence of the game. So if your game is a looter type game, if your game is a type, grind and find type of game, you potentially risk breaking that game and some delicate parts of the game economy by layering on NFTs. So we actually had to think a lot about that in designing kind of our player progression. That's the reason I'm kind of saying it. I definitely am excited about NFTs in the RPG genre, just because that's where ownership, I think, is the most meaningful. But I also think you have to be fairly experienced, I think, in game development and in Web3 to develop a great RPG that incorporates NFTs. I think you need hybridization there. I think other genres like, skins, it's going to be awesome. Like, I think I'd love to see more aesthetic items in games as NFTs. I think aesthetics are the easiest implementation. The secondary market components are awesome. And I guess the only other advice I would give is, it kind of parrots what everyone else is saying, is think about NFTs and crypto as a technology that opens doors. Don't think about it as the feature that's going to make your game stand out. I think that more and more, the tech's getting better, right? Like everybody's going to be able to release a Web3 game very soon. All the on-ramping, all the back ending is almost there, right? So you got to build a great game, and you got to think about exactly what the others were saying, that you got to think about how it fits, because doing it's not going to be that hard anymore. We're going to get to the point where it's just like, back-end servers or multiplayer or things that used to be challenging. You want to build a Web3 game, work with this company, or this company, pay them a licensing fee, and boom, you have the whole back-end stack, ready to go. I think it's at the core, build a great game, think about how Web3 helps push that game forward.
Totally. I agree. So many good tips and pieces of advice. If there's any developers in the audience, we can, all of these panels are recorded too. So if you missed any of the others, we have a YouTube playlist that's just live events, and there you can see all of the recordings of all the panels from this event and past events as well. We're just about up at time, so thank you all so much for joining this panel. I really appreciate it. It seems like we could have talked about this for a whole nother hour, but I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and I know the community is having such a great time in World looking at all of the booths. So thank you all for participating in the event, bringing your brand and your games in here, and being a part of such a fun celebration of Web3 gaming. And to the community, shout out to all of you for jumping in World. I know we've seen all of you out there emoting, doing some pew-pews across the screen. So have fun. There is a daily quest every single day where you can come in, win wearables, win emotes. There are 4 new games to play at the corners of the plaza. If you get a ticket, you get to do the big claw. I think Dana has shown the claw a few times, but it's right in the middle of the plaza. Do the claw. You can come in, win some really fun wearables up top there. Yeah, you can see it. And the team did such a good job. So have fun at the virtual fairground, and we will see you all in Decentraland. There are more panels to come tomorrow. I'm going to go take a breather break today. We have done 4. And yeah, any final words you guys want to share to the community?
I would just enjoy the space and have fun. And I know this isn't necessarily to the community, but to the guys on the panel, thanks. I think everyone shared some really valuable insights, and I hope the community have enjoyed them as well. And Kim, you've been an amazing host.
Thank you. I'm glad you all were able to join.
Yeah, same for me. Thank you very much for having us. And actually, congratulations, Decentraland, for organizing such a very nice event. Kudos to you guys.
Thank you.
I'll say ditto. So nice to be back in the world. This was a great event. Thank you for inviting us. Please, if you're listening to this, go try out the different games that were on this panel. I think that's the best compliment to any of us, that you try our game, you give us honest feedback, and we, we're small enough that we can incorporate that feedback. I think that's the really cool part of this space. So, please do check out all the games on this panel, and I'm excited to see some new members in the community on our side.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, everyone, and have a great time at the Game Expo. We will see you soon, and the music and the party will keep happening in the plaza all night. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy.